hear me? Also in the back. It's a pleasure to be here. And I hope you will apologize my bad voice and that I have to cough in between. But I hope it will turn out all right. I will first take the opportunity to thank the organizers of this Nordic education seminar, Karolina Tavovori, and her team for inviting me. And also, of course, pay my tribute to all the previous presenters for excellent speeches and presentations, interesting. The aim of this presentation and of this study is to have a closer look at educational background, aspirations and needs among foreign prisoners in Nordic prisons. And this is the first time I conduct research within this field, prison context. So I'm very grateful to Professor Tarimanga and also previous senior advisor Torfinn Langelid, which I guess you all know, for giving me this opportunity. And of course it has been interesting for me, who studied in a national study, studied Iraqi inmates, because I've been to the region many times. The outline of the presentation is as follows. I will start by introducing and informing you a little bit about the background of the study, the questions we asked, briefly about methodological and ethical issues, and then move to some preliminary findings, because the result, the analysis result part has not been finalized. And I guess the report will be available in December this year. And the findings are not groundbreaking. What they say are things that also other inmates would say. So I think sometimes it's worth or good to look beyond the ethnic dimension and beyond the national belonging and look at the prisoner as a student, a pupil, who have some aspiration, motivations and need as other prisoners. As Gøril said, he said a little bit about the background and who are behind and in the project. I would like to thank all the parties that has been involved in this project, which has been very inspiring and has been facilitated in an excellent way by the people involved. And first of all, it has been facilitated and supported by the county governor in Hordaland, Norway. They are responsible for all the prison education in Norway. And also to the Bergen Cognition and Learning Group at the University of Bergen, with Professor Tarimanga of Asbjørnsen and others are connected to. The county governor in Hordaland, who helped us with everything, is represented here by Gøril Nøkleby, the woman who presented me, and Paul Breivik. In the second part of the study, it's also supported by the Nordic Council of Ministers and with finances from Nordic. But I would also like to thank Susanne Five from the Norwegian Correctional Services, which is connected to and linked to the Ministry of Police and Public Security, for good advices and help. And of course, also prison staff and educational staff and the inmates we interviewed in all the Nordic prisons where we were present. Thank you all. There has been, as Gerben also said, been conducted a lot of surveys from the Bergen Learning and Cognition Group, which has become Nordic project. It has started on a national level and has become Nordic. So from 2004, there have been these big surveys with all inmates. And in 2009, some of the foreign inmates were also present in the study. And researchers saw the need for further studies and with more qualitative approaches to listen to them and to give them the opportunity to have a voice, as Anja said this morning. So all these surveys have been with regards to education, motivation, and needs among Norwegian and Nordic inmates. And I guess these reports are still available. This Nordic study, the present, contains two parts. The first part is a national study where these 5 countries, Norway, Finland, Denmark, Iceland, and Sweden, made their own national survey or study, all qualitative. Based on these studies, they sent a paper which is supposed to be included in the Nordic report. So what we are doing now is an analysis of these 5 contributions. And we started and we see some traits and common features, but as I said, it's not quite finished yet, but it's very, very interesting. The responsible researcher are from Denmark, Jakob Als Thomsen and Line Seilbaden from Als Research. From Finland, Henrik Lindeborg, which is a doctor of criminology. From Iceland University is Gudmundur Kristmundsson. And also Sweden, Anna-Lena Eriksson Gustafsson is also an academician. And I would like to say that the cooperation between the researcher and the 5 countries have been excellent. It has been no problems at all, and we were so happy that everything just moved so smoothly. So thank you all. If someone is there, I'd like to talk to you, but I don't think so. So, one, of course, of the main reasons for doing this research is that the number of inmates with foreign citizenship or foreign background in Nordic prisons have increased significantly during the 2000s. And I guess you're all aware of it. And I don't know if these figures are quite correct, but I think about. Of course we will check this better, but what we see is that there is a dramatic increase. So we could start perhaps talking about multicultural prisons, or at last very complex and diverse prisons. Because as the case of Norway, when 1/3 or more are foreign prisoners, we cannot pretend like it isn't, or like the politicians from the right-wing party I read on the plane would like to isolate or separate the Norwegian prisoners from other prisoners in separate prisons or departments. Okay, it's a debate, and we could like it or not, but it's a very serious debate. that should be taken, and I think everyone who had something to say in this case should raise their voice, because I think if we start on this path, what is the next institution that is that we should separate? So I think the thinking and the policy is dangerous. That is my opinion. But we know that at one point there were more than 100 nationalities represented in Nordic prisons. And I think it's very important, and I know that this is a debate also among educational staff providers, and perhaps also others, that there are rights connected to education, and it's very, very important to hold these rights high. Because if we forget it, it's very easy in a ordinary day, school day in prison, to forget when there are so many problems connected to it. And I'm not the right one to talk about this, because I have no experience from prison. I have never taught in prisons. You have a lot of experience and you have a lot of knowledge on this. But I guess it must be very complicated many times to be there and to have these rights high and high. But anyway, I think it's perhaps the most important thing, because when we get all other things in an ordinary day, we should still think that they have some rights, and we intend to give it to them. And the right to education is incorporated in the different Nordic education acts. And Nordic countries ensure that the legislation clearly states the legal right and obligation to provide prisoners with the same right to education as other citizens, in accord with international conventions and recommendations. In the protocol to the European Convention for the Protection of Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms of 4th November 1950, which entered into force in 1954 and was signed by member state governments of the Council of Europe, they agreed to the following in Article 2. No person shall be denied the right to education in the exercise of any functions which it assumes in relation to education and to teaching. The state shall respect the right of parents to ensure such education and teaching in conformity with their own religious and philosophical convictions. At the Nordic countries, all the Nordic countries have enshrined this European Convention in their national legislation. So this right also embraces foreign prisoners as long as they are on Norwegian soil. So what was our question? The main question we asked was, what educational backgrounds, aspirations and needs do inmates from Somalia, Russia, Poland, Iraq and Serbia in northern prisons have? And there were also some sub-questions which is not mentioned here. And why the chosen respondent groups? There are a lot of foreign prisoners groups in Nordic prisons, so why these groups? We did not choose the group ourselves. The researcher did not choose. It was in a way given to us. Also, which informants to interview. So the number of informants that we got is based on what was available and what was possible to have who was possible to have an interview with. So the different inmate groups were chosen according to the needs of each Nordic country. It could be because of the amount of the group, that there were many, or that there was a lack of information about the group and their educational background, also in terms of education and background. All in all, and that is not much compared to big quantitative surveys, the total number of respondents in the Nordic project was 62. 59 men, 3 women. That was also a choice that was made why we didn't interview, there was a question here, more women, because there are women even if they are few compared to all the men in prison. So that could be a follow-up study, for example, to take only the women. In Iceland interviewed Polish inmates, 8, and I guess it was all the Polish inmates that are in Iceland. I think it's the total population of this group. They were all men born between 54 and 93. All of them young, most of them, only one over 40. They are born in Poland, the same as their parents. And they came to Iceland as adults, except from one. And this group has a relatively good basic education from Poland. The next group is Finland, who interviewed Russian inmates, 9 men and 2 women, with an average of 34 years. And here we see some of the problems. Here is 8, of the 11 is 8 Russian Estonian, 3 Russian Finnish, 5 are born in Estonia, 2 in the former Soviet Union, because they defined it like that, and 1 from Latvia. So we see here, as also in the Iraqi study, that even if we define them as one category, there are many ethnic belongings and definitions and tilhørighet. Yeah. In each of these groups. So when we came to the Iraqi group, we saw that there were a lot of Kurds and also other smaller minority. I say Kurds, I define them because it's a region in Iraq, which is a kind of state, if we are a little bit loose on that definition. So it's very easy to define them as the category in the statistics, but when you come there, they do not at all define themselves as Iraqi. No, never. They don't want to speak the language. So therefore, it's so important to read the context and to know the group. If we need to give them some kind of education, it's very, very important to know the background in their context. Yeah. So the Iraqi are also all men born in Iraq from parents who are also born in Iraq. And the majority came to Norway alone, 5 together with family. And I guess also, as the case in some of the other groups, they have served in Europe because they have a lot of language knowledge on a lot of languages in Europe and the Middle East, and they must have been like moved from one place to another, many of them. In Sweden, they have interviewed Serbian inmates, also all men, 40 to 60, born in former Yugoslavia, some says. Others says no, I'm born in Bosnia, Croatia, Kosovo, Serbia, Yugoslavia. So again, we see that they define themselves in other ways than the categories we have. In Denmark, Somalian inmates were interviewed, and this Denmark is in a way special with this group because most of them came as very small children or very young adolescents, and no one came as adults. So they speak very good, very good. They speak Danish. And so there was no need for interpreter, for example. And some of them, they have also better basic education than, for example, the inmates from Iraq, who has a very poor educational background. So I think, I'm sorry, the group with I won't compare in that way because what is knowledge, what is education, what is learning, but I think as we see it, the Iraqi group have the poorest educational background. It's also the group with many, at least, perhaps we shouldn't say illiterate, but at least functional illiterates. Yes, thank you, Guri. She makes small signs from the audience about timing. Also, I think in terms of the educational background and context, some of these groups come from very difficult backgrounds in terms of war-ridden environments or political conflicts, or the life conditions are very hard in that area or that country. The labor market is closed to almost everyone. So many of them seek a new fortune, a new future in another country. I think for many of them that was the basic reason for coming here or to do what they did. Of course, there are many reasons why they are in prison, but some of them, I think we can see this as a main reason almost. The questionnaire was pre-designed, meaning we just got the interview guide in our hands on a researcher who did this national studies. And it was designed in two parts. One qualitative. It should be completely qualitative, but as we see it, there were two parts. The first part was obviously qualitative, with many open questions, very easy to have as basis for the conversation with the inmates. The second part was quantitative, because it was only room for marking off their answer, which was graded. And I think it made the whole situation a little bit complicated, because when we came to the second part, we in a way lost the informant or the inmate, because he was so occupied in understanding and trying to mark off the right thing and correspond with the interpreter Is this right? Is this right? Is this what you mean? So we lost the chance to talk about the subject. And that part was about ICT. How do you adjust to the Norwegian society? Do you know many people in this country? Would you like to know more? How do you manage your daily life? A lot of social cultural issues. So, but I think most of the researchers asked additional questions. So I think we have a pretty good overview, even though. But it was not a very good design in a way to suit this study. So we can do better later on, I think. We have some experience now. And also, the language was difficult and a bit academic. We have to explain a lot what we meant, what we really meant to ask. Yeah. We used interpreter, and that was because we suppose that even if they speak some of the language in the country where they're incarcerated, I don't think they are so good in the language. So what we experienced was that most of the inmates who were asked said, yes, we want to have an interpreter present. And I thought perhaps they would resist because they were afraid perhaps this person will go and leak information about me outside. He's from the same national group or ethnic group, and I'm suspicious. But not at all. They were very happy to have the interpreter there, except that month they didn't needed it. And they used it a lot. And also those who said, no, we don't want to have an interpreter, asked for afterwards, because during all the interview, the interpreter was available in another room. And then, if they said, we wanted, I marked off for no, but can I have it please? Then it just came. And also the sound file was not a problem. Also here we thought that perhaps they would resist and say, oh, they can recognize our voice, but it was no problem at all. I said something already about the interview guide, which should have been, it was clear, but it was difficult to understand. And I think that we knew before we came to prison to interview these inmates, we already had read and looked at the educational system in the country where these prisoners came from. So the fact that we were able to talk about that was a very good thing in the conversation. What we also experienced was that on forehand, before we came, they had signed their consent. But we started by asking, did you understand what was in this consent? Do you know what you have signed? Can you tell me what you think this is? And it showed that they understood a little bit, but not all. Some did, most of them didn't. So we had to take it one more time to ensure that they really had a qualified consent, signed a qualified consent. And of course, I'm sure you also experience a lot, there are many emotional turbulent situations, and also in these interviews, they were so happy, all of them, to talk. And I'm sure they would have been there sit longer if they could. And even in the Iraqi case, they brought a Pakistani prisoner who they thought were from Iraq. And he came and we sat down and we started and we talked a lot. And then suddenly he said, Iraq, I've never been to Iraq. And he was a Pakistani. And he was so sad when he had to leave again. He didn't want to leave. But he had to, obviously. So. And others were crying because they hadn't had a chance to actually talk about these things. So they were very happy to be there. So even if it was emotional, I think it was very good for many of them to talk about these issues. So what do they say? They say that, is this readable? Yeah. I always had a positive attitude toward acquiring all kinds of knowledge, says one from Russia. My dream is to become an archaeologist. And many had these dreams of becoming medical doctors, dentists, politicians. They wanted to be, what's it called? The lawyers. Many wanted to be lawyers. And it's like what Anja said, it's not, of course, not realistic, and I knew it was not, but they still had this dream. It's crucial to have an education. Education and science are important. And I think the Iraqi prisoners saw knowledge as some kind of status. So therefore science is status. Many of these lawyer, medical doctor, all these professions have high status. Exams, diploma is good in life. And that is also something that came to the fore, that there's so much want to have a diploma or confirmation or a paper stating that this, I have learned this, and this can be confirmed, to at least show to future employers. Sorry. So, educational background. They have, even if they have a very short, limited educational background, like one of the Iraqis had only a year of schooling, they are very positive to school and education. That goes for almost all, in all the countries. They are positive. They want to have education, they want to learn more, they want a profession, they want training, but it's difficult to achieve. We will come back to that. All of them started at expected time, 6 or 7 years. They have relatively good basic education, even if there are big differences between the countries. The differences are whether they can document completed education. For some have their documents with them, but most of them haven't. And they can't document what they have. For example, in the Iraqi case, those who have completed compulsory, they don't have a paper on it, or it's gone lost, or they can't go back because the school or the institution burnt down. So it's very difficult for them this time to document. And therefore it's crucial to give them something in the hand, a paper that shows that I can something, I have some competencies. And of course this has to do with the circumstances in the countries where they are. The Finnish studies show that the parents many of the parents also had education, not perhaps on the highest level, but many were educated. And at the bottom, 16 of the total respondents of 62 are educated beyond upper secondary school, which is not much. Because I think, I'll just give an example from the Iraqi group, only 2 had higher education, and that was a military academy and Hjelpepleier nurse assistant, ikke helt, not quite that, hjelpepleier. So what do they want to learn? They want, first of all, they want language courses. And a language training in the country, the language in the country that are incarcerated. They want to learn more, they have more digital skills. So computer courses, vocational education or training, because some of them actually have received an education in the vocational field, but some of them only had some courses. Some wanted to complete studies, for example, Denmark and in the Finnish study. Some had started education and wanted to finish it when they are in prison. And why do they want this? Yes, because they wanted to have a more meaningful time when they are in prison. Perhaps the most important motivation for all was that they wished to provide for family and children. And also have a chance for the future, as a future work life. And as one of the Russians said, I prefer to finish high school and perhaps continue at the university. The question is whether this is possible or not. Yeah. So, what kind of educational activities do they have in prison? What we see is that many of these inmates never attend educational courses in prison, and they have waited for a very long time. But the courses they attend is language courses, often English, and the native language of the country where we're incarcerated. They attend computer courses, vocational education, and completing education courses. So we see it corresponds with what they wish to do. Yeah, in Denmark, reported that only 2 respondents have participated in prison education. It has to do with, in Denmark, there are many in prisoners from this school in detention. And in detention, educational activities or other activities are voluntary. So it might be that, just correct me if I'm wrong now, or misunderstood, or add, that some of them choose not to, or the choices or the options are not what I actually want to engage in. Yeah. But as you see from the excerpt, they want to have practical training most of all. There are many barriers to education in prison, it seems. First of all, we can look at the second part, common traits. There are very few educational programs. It's limited information on education offered. Limited time in prison is one barrier for starting. And not least the language barrier, trouble of understanding information, which in Norway is in Norwegian and English, in some prisons at least. So if you don't speak any of these languages, you can't understand. And many of them, they have no clue what's going on. They do not understand what is this, what's in it for me, can I attend, can I not? And if they apply, They have to wait a long time before they are accepted or get any information of what's going on in the waiting time. When it comes to work experience, many of them have random and numerous jobs. They have had unskilled jobs. They have only a short time of employment. Some of them started their own businesses. Some point out that previous jobs required education. So they got fired because they hadn't. And the difference is that Norway, work is mainly tied to family and small businesses. The Iraqi immigrants said, it's no problem because I have an uncle and I can work with him. So they wasn't very worried because they had this network of relatives who run small businesses. In Sweden, who interviewed the Serbs, they said they had no previous work experience. And in Denmark, one of them said that he had been employed for a 10-year period, and that was an exception because most of them had just very small and short time works. When it comes to the future, it was many of them said that it's difficult to talk about the future. I have no future. How can I sit here in prison? I don't know what's going to happen to me. I don't know what sentence I get. How can I have a future? How can I dream about my future? And imprisonment diminishes the faith in the future. Many have the perception of not being needed. And their criminal history obviously complicates the process of finding a job, of planning a future. Yeah. But even though they are, in terms of how, if they plan and if they see a future, job is very important to them because it represents a new start. And in this kind of discussion of field or dreams, they expose the decision of central. Because many of them know that they will be sent out after they have been incarcerated. And of course it's difficult. Some of them said, it's not a problem, I'll come back. I'll buy a Schengen visa and be back as soon as possible. But for most of them, it was a very heavy load on their shoulders that they knew they had to go back. About competencies, it showed that many of these respondents had spoke a lot of languages. Not that they could write it, and not that it was perfect, but they had been border crossers, they had been working in neighbor countries, so they spoke Persian, Turkish, Greek, and of course in the former Soviet Union and these areas in the East, they also speak more than one language. But in a way, we're not used to see this as competencies because it's languages that we don't use. Doesn't mean that it's not a competency. We're used to thinking that English is the language of the world. So if you can't speak English, it's much it's not yeah, I formulated it wrongly. It doesn't have the status as, for example, English has. And I think that's a failure because it's, even if you can't use it here, just that we give credit to these languages is very important for these people. And they've learned English, many of them have learned English in prison from other prisoners, which is a good thing, I think. Just a little bit about language and ICT, which is coming from the second part of the questionnaire. Many of these inmates speak very well. Many of them speak a little, and it shows that, the language of the country where they are incarcerated, that oral situations are easier than writing. It's not groundbreaking news, but even so. It's difficult for them to read and fill out public forms, to read longer texts, and of course, this is very important skill to have, because if you can't fill out the form from a public institution, you are not participating, you have no control over your life, over your day. So I think that is something we should pay attention to. And also it has to do in the broader sense about participation and democracy. If you get a lot of people who cannot fill out the simple form, you get a lot of people who just fall off and are marginalized in terms of democratic processes in society. Yeah. For example, in Iceland, only 6 of 8 respondents do not comprehend at all. So, a few of them from Iceland, they could speak Icelandic a little bit. Most of them didn't speak at all. In terms of digital competence, there seems to be a general mastery of basic computer skills. And of course, I think some of them over-reported their skills, said they were much better, they could much more things than they actually could. But I think even though most of them had some kind of knowledge of of emailing, for example. But of course, if you have limited writing skills, how can you write emails? I'll soon finish. Yeah. They find the educational system in the country where incarcerated very strange in comparison to the one in the home country. In Denmark, this was not so big a problem because they had to a large extent taken their education in Denmark. In Norway, several respondents need more education in order to survive in a country where incarcerated. These were words that I used. And in Denmark, even if they saw that we need more education in order to survive. Both in Denmark and Norway, many of the informants said that they needed help and support if they should take an education in prison. While in Iceland, they said that no such support was needed, because they also had the English language to a larger extent than the other countries. Yeah, but several of them, and that has to do with the jobs that I had, say that education hasn't been so important to perform previous work. The current situation and the future, in Norway and Denmark they say that they have knowledge on the work life in the country where incarcerated. But in Iceland, the Polish say that they do not have such, a minority have not such knowledge. In Norway and Iceland, they are optimistic towards work after release, while Somalis in Denmark see that it will be impossible. But even though they are confident that they will try and try to get a job in the future, but they are not very optimistic. Yeah. In Finland, many have expulsion decisions, see job possibilities in Estonia as limited, but still have a positive view of personal future. And that was also something that struck me, that even if they know they have to be sent back, they have some kind of visions of what they will do in the future. And they believe that they will adjust. If they get to work, they will manage to adjust to work-life demands. They face various structural and organizational barriers. And as I said, it's not groundbreaking, because I'm sure that many of the other inmates in Nordic prison also face the same barriers. And I talked about the transfer between prisons how they cause interruption in training and education. But there's one thing that I think is very important, and that is that they are not sufficiently aware of educational rights. They don't know, some of them, but many of them do not know what is going on and what's in it for me. Can I apply? Can I attend? Can I not? So the information part has to be paid more attention to as it is now. And there is a lack of such information, and it's a lack of information in our mother tongue. And of course, many of these only speak there, will only understand things in their mother tongue. So I think it should be, I won't say easy, but perhaps it would be possible to make brochures or booklets about education in prison in the main, at least, languages that are represented. They have very diverse educational backgrounds, and I think knowledge about their background is basic if you attempt to create and develop a good program for the individuals. So there are a lot of information on the internet and in books and articles to where you can receive that kind of knowledge. And it's crucial to situate a study like this, but also the educational program in the context of that respondent. And I think that is, in the school terms, like adjusted education, tilpasset opplæring, which we hold very high. They are highly motivated for learning and training, even though they have different educational motives. And education and training in order to get a job, to provide for their families. I think that is the strongest motivation that we see among these groups. Yeah, I think I will stop there. Yeah, one more point, the most important, and I mentioned it before, that if they learn something, even if it's a small thing and small skills, give them some kind of confirmation that this has been carried out, and in which way. It was a question about the curriculum. It should be also possible to refer to the curriculum, what kind of things they have learned according to the country's curriculum. I think it's also about some kind of respect and self-esteem, to have these papers in hand, which many of them never had. So I hope this is something that we can underline in the report. And I thank you for being so patient. And in the report, which will be available around Christmas, you will find much more than this. Thank you for being so patient.